Awesome. So welcome everyone to our, I want to call this fourth. Is it fourth, do you think, Vickie?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah, study session for our platform app builder. So this is a series of study sessions that we've been running throughout 2021 on studying up for your platform app builder certification, biting it down into bite-sized chunks, hopefully to finally, help you out to pass this exam. So today's session, we've moved on from a couple of different sessions. If you want to see any previous sessions, please check out our YouTube channel, Ladies Be Architects, and that will have previous videos categorized into kind of different folders. But today we're going to be taking a look at the first part of business logic and process automation, which is formula fields, roll-up summary fields, validation rules, and approval processes. Before we start, we want to give a big thank you to our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have things like Google Meet and our YouTube channel and all of our other Salesforce-esque things. So a big thank you to Otter7, Capstorm, Southern and Cloud for helping support Ladies Be Architects. Vickie.
This is me. So my name is Vickie. I live in Brisbane, Australia, and I'm head of technology at Offshore. I run Brisbane User Group as well as Ladies Be Architects, and my passion is definitely in systems architecture, which is why I love all of this stuff.
Awesome. And myself, so I'm Adrienne Cutcliffe. I'm a business solutions consultant at Traction on Demand. I'm also based in Brisbane, Australia, and I help run our Brisbane Women in Tech local user group. And Vickie forgot to mention, because I do sometimes, but Vickie and myself are both Salesforce MVPs as well.
Oh, yeah.
We forget. So our agenda for today is quite straightforward. We want to get you as much knowledge as we can in the hour that we've got for you. So I'll welcome, let's jump into it, and then any questions throughout. If you do have a question and you might forget it or you aren't quite sure, feel free to drop it in the chat. While Vickie's talking, I'll take a look at the chat. While Vickie's talking, I'll take a look at the chat, and we'll see if we can get any of those questions answered partway through. Vickie, do you want to just do an intro?
Yeah, sure. So if you don't know who Ladies Be Architects are, it was three friends with a shared vision a few years ago who wanted to themselves go down the CTA track, but also to encourage other women to, because there were very few women CTAs in the world. I'm not sure how many there are now, but it's still a small percentage compared to our male counterparts. So Gemma, Susanna and Charlie still involved in Ladies Be Architects, but very busy these days in their various roles. And then here in Australia, so we've got myself and Adrienne, and we've also got Emily McCowan, who has recently had a baby, so she hasn't been too involved, but she's just getting back into the workforce now, so we'll probably see a bit more of her soon.
Awesome. So we like to leave this slide in. We want to give out swag to people who have been passing exams recently. So if you've been passing an exam, anything along the architect track, so your app builder, if you do jump in and grab it, you've passed an admin exam recently, any other exams that you're taking into, we want to know about it. Please let us know. You can let Vickie and I know. You can @mention Arc Ladies. You can @mention either of us. We'll try and get some swag in your hands. Awesome. So let's get started. And Vickie, I'm taking over all of these because you have about 1 million slides.
Good.
So we're here today for Platform App Builder. And as I mentioned, the 4 areas that we're going to be covering are only a portion of business logic and process automation. So I've cut this little screenshot off partway through. But business logic and process automation does make up 28% of the Platform App Builder exam, which if you've taken Salesforce exams before, you'll know is actually quite a big chunk of the exam, almost a third there. So the things that we're going to be going through today will cover these 4 key areas for you. So at the end of today's session, you should be able to demonstrate the use of formula fields to meet business requirements, determine capabilities and use cases of roll-up summary fields, demonstrate validation rules, and then define the capabilities and use cases for approval processes. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Vickie, who's going to talk us through formula fields at first.
All right, so formula fields, first off, what are they? So they're custom fields inside objects in Salesforce. They are read-only. They will calculate a value. So that value could be a numerical value, it could be a text value based on other fields, but you use calculations in these, and some of these can be quite complex, which we're going to go through today. To get to these calculations, you're going to use what Salesforce calls operators and functions. And there are different return types, as I mentioned, text and numeric. There are others as well. And they're automatically updated. Now, that part is quite important to remember, that they are automatically updated. And why I say that is because if you decide that you want a formula field on a record, you've got to remember that it's going to update any time that it's the values that you're using in it change. So if you're wanting it to stay static, that's not going to happen. You need to use something else for that. Okay, next slide. It does have limitations, so you can't search a formula field. It can't be encrypted, and you can't use long text area or description fields in a formula. The fields referenced in a formula field, they can't be deleted, and a field value cannot depend on another formula that references it. So you get into a bit of a circular motion there. They can only have up to 3,900 characters, including spaces, and they cannot exceed 4,000 bytes when saved. Next one.
So I guess a handy reference to know there is that if you try to make a formula field smaller by putting a formula field and then referencing another formula field, Salesforce knows about it. Yeah. And you're still going to hit those limits.
I did try and do this very long nested if statement the other day, and it was way too long for the formula field. And I was like, oh, damn. And I actually had to change a field name because I had quite a long field name in there, and that made it fit. So, tricks of the trade. Okay, so how do we create a formula field? So in the object manager in Lightning, so we'll concentrate only on Lightning, not on Classic. You will select the object, select fields and relationships, and click New. You're going to then select what formula type you want, and you can see here that there are a number of different ones, which we'll go through soon. You're going to enter the field label and field name, and if it's number or currency or percent, it's going to ask you how many decimal places that you want, and then you're going to enter the formula. So the window that you create the formula field in looks like this. So you've got a few different portions of it. You've got your formula window, which is where you're going to enter the formula itself. You've got your check syntax button, description and help text fields, and then a formula function helper, which will allow you to understand what you need in the different formulas when you select them. And then blank handling. So that means, do you want the field to be looked at as a 0 or as a blank field if there's nothing in it? And we'll go through all of these in the slides. All right, so what were those return types? Sorry, so we've got a number of them. We've got checkbox, so that's going to return a Boolean value, true or false, based on whether the box is checked or not. We've got currency, date and time, number, percent, text, and just time. So when you create your formula field, you're going to select one of these. So that's what your return type is. That's what the format of the field is going to be. So we've got simple formulas and advanced formulas. Now, our simple ones are going to be based on the real simple stuff, your operators, your add, subtract, multiply, divide, your exponentials, and you can put your open and close parentheses in there to separate out your calculations. So it's a real simple. This particular one is amount of credit minus a funding settlement amount minus a cancellation by the look of it, which is just going to give you a figure in the background. So very the very basic, as it says, simple formulas. So this is just a example of what return type you'll get. So if I say I've got my field 1 equaling 5, my field 2 equaling 10, you can see on this table that if I add my field 1 to the number 30, I'm going to get 35 back. If I subtract it, I'm going to get minus 25. If I multiply, I'm going to get 150. The divide, so you're going to get 0.166667. If you do your exponential, you'll get 625, which is your 5 by 5 by 5 by 5 on field 1. And your open and close parentheses is where you're going to separate out your calculations to make sure they run correctly. Again with operators, so here we've got some Boolean returns. Our priority field is low, our field 1 is still 5, and our field 2 is 10. So I'm using logical operators in here where I'm saying priority equals high. If a priority equals high, and you can see there that I've got the equals or the double equals, you can use either. So that's an AND value. And the Boolean there is false because it's low. I've got the not equal to. So again, you've got two options there. You've got the less than or greater than type bracket. And you've also got the exclamation mark and the equal sign, both of those equals not equals. And my example here is I'm saying the priority is not equal to high, and that's true because it's low. And you've then got less than, and there I've also got the Boolean return. So I'm saying field C being 5 is less than field 10 being field 2 being 10, and that's true. And then less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. So both of those come back with a Boolean of true or false. For this one, I'm just showing you how you can use AND in your formulas. So AND with Salesforce is 2 ampersands. Well, it's actually one of the ways you can do that, so with 2 ampersands. So I'm saying in here, in the if statement, if my priority is high and my field 1 is less than field 2, return true, otherwise return false. So it's going to return false because my priority is actually low. And then here's the second way of doing it. So you've got AND, which you put in the front of your formula rather than using the 2 ampersands. And then you put your criteria inside parentheses. So I'm saying priority C again is high, field 1 is less than field 2, return true and return false. So you can just see there the two different ways to use AND. And often the second way is much simpler than using the first way and reduces your character amounts that you need inside your field formula. And then you can do the same thing with OR. So OR, and I don't even know what these things are actually called. Do you, Adrienne?
I feel like I've heard them referred to as like pipes before.
Yeah, something like that. so you can use the two pipes or in your formula. So in this one, I've got if the priority C is high or the field value is less than field 1 is less than field 2, then return true, or put in false.
Which you should have actually.
Had true. Yeah. Just ignored that.
I was reading it and I was like, whoa. On the plus side, I know how to read a formula.
Okay, then we move on to advanced formulas. So the advanced formula tab allows you to do much more advanced things. And the functions themselves can be selected, which will give you a description. So you can see on the right there, I'm using add months, and it tells me what have I got to put in here. So I've actually got to put a date in and then a number in. So it might be that the date could be another field, might be closed date on opportunity, and the number. So I might want to add, say, 3 months to it. So I put 3 in there. Oh, I think you missed one, did you?
No, I accidentally skipped it and then I went.
Okay. All right, so we use a check syntax button. So we saw this on our formula field. And what we're going to do here is when we've finished our formula, we're going to click check syntax, and it's going to tell us if there's anything wrong. So it will pick up things like if a field doesn't exist, if we've got too many parentheses in there, or not enough parentheses in there, and will give us an error message at the bottom so we can go back and fix it up. So you can see in here that I've put in a field called payment due date, and I've probably typed it in rather than clicking insert field. So it's telling me that it actually doesn't exist. I need to check my spelling. Okay, next slide. So we can do cross-object formulas. So these are ones where you're being able to reference a parent object. So you can reference fields. I can't remember the levels. I should have written that in here, but oh yeah, I'm not even going to guess at this point. Do you know at all, Adrienne, how many up you can go?
7 from
You
memory.
think 7? Yeah.
I
Okay.
feel like it's 7.
So you can see in here what I've done is I've referred to in my review custom object. I've referred to job application, then I've referred to the applicant, and I want to put the first name in the field, and the last name. So what Salesforce does is it actually refers to those relationships with an R, which is different to underscore R, sorry, which is different to your underscore C, which is your field itself. And the last name doesn't have underscore C on it because it's a standard field, which don't have the underscore C on them.
I feel like I'm just going to pull these apart this morning, but a note to these as well.
Thanks, Adrienne.
I know that for some of these as well, especially if you're trying to merge 2 fields together, what you occasionally need as well is 2 quotes with a space, like another, so quote, space, quote, and then another ampersand to make sure that you're actually adding things like a plus.
That is true, yes.
Your names. I'm sorry, I didn't proofread properly.
It's all good.
And I was like, no, I'm rude.
Okay, so there's so many functions available to us. I'm not going to go through all of these. I've got a few examples that we'll go through, but it's good to understand what each of these can do. You will get questions about various ones of these in the cert. But they're split up into 4 different areas. So date and time, obviously that's going to apply to everything that's date and time. And then logical, so this is our if statements, our is something blank, is it new, is it null, etc. Our math functions, so some more advanced operators as such, and then our text functions. So these are things like putting in a hyperlink or using isPickval if we've got a pick list that we're wanting to return, or putting an image in. It's a really good one that you can often do, putting an image in based on another field. So you might want to show a nice little picture that's for your case status, for example, rather than just new or working or closed. Next slide. All right, so we'll go through some of these. So hopefully there's no errors that Adrienne picks up on. But these are the date and time, examples of the date and time functions. So I've got my return type to the left. And what I'm doing here is I'm using a number, and I want to know how many days until my close date. So I've got the close date field minus today, which is one of our date time functions. Text. So the next one is text. We're going to return the year. Now you see that the year is not actually text, it's a number. But if you're wanting to treat the year as a year, you'd often put it in as text. You put it in as a number, it's going to put comma in the middle or before the last 3 digits. So you might not want it to do that. So I've put text around the year as well. So what this one does is, if we look at the year part of it, I'm saying, what is the year of the close date? And then that's going to return 2021 for me if we're in this year. But I want it to display as text. So I've put text around the entire formula, and it will come back as text. If I don't do that, you can see in the next one down that it's going to come back as a number. Or if I put in the number, it's going to come back as a number. And it won't actually allow me, even if I put in text or put the return type as text, to have that come back as text, it will ask me to put text around it to return that as text. And then as before, we talked about the add months. So I've got a close date in there, and I'm wanting to add 3 months to it. So it's going to put it out to the 1st of June 2022 for me. Or actually, it's Australian, so it's the 6th of January 2022. Okay, next one. This one's logical functions. So we've got a few in here. We're going to do some looking at returning the type of checkbox, and we're looking at whether the probability is greater than 0.65 and if it's closed won. So we're wanting to, I've forgotten what I'm doing with this one. So the result for this one's going to be true or false. So if we look at this one, so we've got probability greater than 0.65, so I've forgotten what I've done here. And then I've got a text stage of closed won or a text stage of closed loss. Sorry, a stage name of closed loss. That's going to say if the probability is greater than 65 and the stage name is closed won or closed lost, it's going to return a true or false result. So the next one is text. So we've got logical function here of if, and we've also got not and is blank. So there's a few in here. So we use is blank to say whether there's nothing in a field. So I'm saying if priority client is blank and the probability is less than 0.65, I want to put yes in here. But you see that I've got not in there as well. So that's what you're going to put before it if you want to say that it's not blank, rather than saying is not blank. So, and I'm going to get a return for this one of yes or no, because that's what I've put in my if statement. You can see there the yes and the no in speech marks. So the last one is actually where you can put in the image of something. So I want to put in a gold, silver, or bronze coin type thing if I've got that in my rating. So if gold, silver, or bronze is in my rating, then it's going to return the gold, silver, or bronze GIF that's sitting in the samples folder in images. So we'll pick this one apart. So what it is we're putting in image. So we're telling it we want to return an image. It's got to be in a text return type if you're doing this. And then we're using case. So this is our logical function. And case is similar to an if statement, but you're able to write it out a little bit easier. So instead of using nested if statements for this, I can actually put, in the case, I'm looking at the rating field. If it's gold, do this. If it's silver, do this. If it's bronze, do this. Else, just put an unknown in the field. Before I move on, has anyone got any questions about any of these? Oh, okay, next slide. So here's our maths functions. So these are probably more basic than our logical functions, but they're just going to do things like round up fields, give you square roots of fields, put in a ceiling amount. So I've put those 3 in as examples. So if we round, it's going to round to your nearest whole number. With a square root, it's going to give you the square root, which for 60,000 is 244.95. And for a ceiling, so it's going to round up to round up to the nearest whole number. All right, text functions. So for the examples for these ones I've put in is I actually want to put in something like a hyperlink. So and the hyperlink is based on an initial URL, but I also want to put an external ID in. So I'm trying to get to an external system and open that perhaps account in the external system. So the first part of that formula is hyperlink. I'm telling the system that I want this to return as a hyperlink text. I'm saying, okay, so use this first part of the URL and use the external ID field, my custom field. So it's going to put a number in or something in there. The text that I want to show for the URL is click here to access the client in the external system. And then the last part of that hyperlink formula is that I'm putting in here blank. I want it to open in a new page. You'd put in self underscore self if you wanted it to open in the same page. Okay, and the next one, I'm putting in a text value. I've not put results in here because there's no need, but I'm saying if the payment due date is less than today and the payment status is unpaid, then I want to put payment overdue in the field. Otherwise, I don't want to do anything. So the text statements in here is pick val. I need to use that because my payment status is a pick list. So I can't just say payment status is unpaid. It won't allow you to do that. You've got to put is pick val in as your into your formula to understand, to tell Salesforce that you're looking at a pick list. And the last one there is text. So we've seen that one before, where we're going to return text for the year rather than a number. Next one. Over to Adrienne.
Awesome. Thank you, Vickie. So Rollup Summaries. We're going to move on to covering this one now. So what are they? So Rollup Summary fields are read-only fields that are placed on the master side of a master detail relationship. So these are things in your Salesforce, like placing a field to roll up opportunity product information, opportunity line item information onto an opportunity, or to roll up opportunity information onto an account. So they actually summarize all of the records beneath them. The detail record must be related through a master detail relationship. So if you don't have a master detail in place and you're trying to create this type of relationship anywhere other than your master record, you're not going to find it. And then the types of these fields that you can calculate are actually dependent upon the type of calculation that you're looking for. And we'll get to what those types look like in just a moment. But first of all, what are Rollup Summary fields and what do they look like? I forgot to go through the click path that Vickie did in my slides. But to create a Rollup Summary, you want to go into your Lightning Object Manager, select the master in the master detail relationship, create a new field, and select the type of Rollup Summary field. Once you select and name the field, you're going to get a screen that looks a little bit like this. So it's going to ask you the object that you want to summarize. Because I'm creating this field on account, I've selected that I want to summarize the opportunities that there are for this account. I then get 4 options on how I want to select or how I want to roll up my information. And then I can also add in some filter criteria down the bottom here. So filter criteria is determining what records should be included. So whether we're going to summarize all records related to this account or just a subset based on a number of fields. So what are the types of roll-up summaries that you can have? The first of which that we saw is account. So account simply just says how many of these records are there. I might want to come in and sort of, there's a couple of examples of these later, but maybe saying how many opportunities do I have? The sum will total the values in a field that you select. So these can only be based on number, currency, and percent fields. So this is then summarizing, say, the amount of all opportunities related to the account. And then we have our min and our max. So min and our max are essentially the same information, just on different ends of the scale. So min will show you the lowest value in whatever field you select based on the records, and max will show you the highest value. And we'll run through a few examples of those. So here we can see that I've just given you a few examples of these roll-up summaries and what they look like. So as I mentioned, our count field, because it's just simply counting the related records, will have the number of opportunities related to that account. So I've just gone in, created a field, selected opportunities, left the filter criteria as to show all records, and selected my count. An example of that would be if you wanted to see the total amount of all closed won opportunities related to an account. So this is where I'd come in and not only select my count, I'd choose what field I wanted it to summarize by, which would be my amount field. And then I will also add some filter criteria to say I only want it to roll up into this field if a stage is closed one. And then our min and our max. So for our min, I might want to see the date of the earliest close one opportunity for an account record. So this is the first deal that I ever won. So again, I would create my min field in this instance. I would summarize by the close date field, and I would make sure that my filter criteria is set to only show me closed won opportunities. And then our max, same kind of story. We can then do the other scale, so the largest deal ever related to an account record, or the highest discount ever provided to an opportunity. So maybe we're saying, what's the most we've ever discounted this customer? Which means that we can then pick max. We might want to roll up by the discount field and put that onto our account record as well. Some considerations for the roll-up summary fields. So if you're utilizing a roll-up summary field on that master object, what you can't then do is go to that detail relationship and change the relationship type to a standard lookup. It'll error you out and say that there's roll-up summary fields being used. Roll-up summaries, much like our formula fields that Vickie covered, are read-only and can't manually be edited. So this is only based on the information beneath. Salesforce doesn't recalculate the value of campaign roll-up summary fields when leads or contacts are deleted. So you might have noticed that if you're rolling something up from a campaign to somewhere else, or if you're using any of those fields, when you delete a lead or a contact, it's not recalculating these. What you actually need to do, and this is the case for any of these, is that if any of your roll-up summaries look out of sync, you've deleted records or something's happened, you can actually force a mass recalculation of your roll-ups by editing that field and selecting that you want to do a mass recalculation. So this is what you'll have to do if contacts or leads are deleted on campaign roll-up summaries. And you can't use fields like long text areas, multi-select pick lists, auto numbers, system fields, cross-object formulas, or lookup fields. These are purely for those more numerical types. If you did want to, roll up maybe all of the pick list values from the records beneath, there are some great declarative tools out there that have been written on the App Exchange, some a little to the side that we like to use as well, such as declarative lookup roll-up summaries that fill in the gaps of places where standard Salesforce roll-up summary fields do not. However, for the purpose of Platform App Builder, keep in mind that these are really just for numerical-based fields.
Just a note on something like declarative lookup roll-up summaries. It's a fantastic app to look at. It also means that you don't have to have a master detail relationship to use a roll-up summary field. You just have to have a lookup.
Awesome. Some more considerations. Forgot I had 2 slides of these. If a roll-up summary field doesn't contain a cross-object field, roll-up summaries can't contain cross-objects. So for example, if you're using a formula field that has a is returning now or returning today in it, you can't use that in a roll-up summary. Changes to the value of roll-up summary fields can trigger assignment rules to run, and they can also trigger workflow rules and field validations as well. However, they don't fire when you're causing a mass recalculation of roll-up summary fields. So I could say when the amount of a roll-up summary field changes, I want to fire a workflow, but a mass recalculation of data or roll-up summary field values doesn't. And I'm not going to read each of these out. They will be provided in the slide deck later. But some of these are just examples of things that would cause them not to fire when you're doing a mass recalculation. Validation rules.
All right, so validation rules, again, what are they? So these allow verification of data to meet required standards before a record is saved. Now, those required standards are based on you and your company. They will use formulas with a returning result of true or false. And you can add custom error messages, which is kind of fun sometimes. And they're used for things like data quality, data type and length, required field value, something that you need to make sure that people are putting into a field or not putting into a field. Right, so you get to these from your object manager. Well, I don't know, I've put objects too, but object manager, you're going to click validation rules, and that will give you a list of all your validation rules, in your error message, your error location, and who last modified it, and whether it's active or not. Anatomy of a validation rule. So this is the first part of the screen. So what we're looking at here is we give our rule a name. In this case, it's going to need to be a name that doesn't have any spaces in it. We select whether it's active or not in the state. We're going to put our error condition in the formula box. And then again, we've got our formula functions on the right that will allow us to know what we need to be putting in different formulas. This one. And then we've got our error message. This is on the second part of the page, wouldn't fit on one slide. So you can put in there a message to tell the user what the problem is. So in this case, you cannot add a ceased contact as a primary contact. So in the formula field for this one, I've said if the contact selected in primary contact is ceased, then you can't add it. So this error message will come up. And then your error location. So that's going to be top of page or on a field. And here's two examples at top of page and what happens with the fields for our error messages. So top of page is enlightening is actually bottom of page. And you got this one, so Salesforce actually puts we hit a snag, and then you've got my error message there. You cannot add a ceased contact as a primary contact. And then if I select it on fields, I'm going to see you've got to review the following field, primary contact. And when I look at that field, it's highlighted in red with my error message. So we've always got limitations and considerations. So with validation rules, you do need to consider the order of execution. So if you don't know what the order of execution is, then go and have a look at it. It's much longer than the 5-point list that I've put in here. But validation rules will run after, before triggers. So that is important to know, and you could be asked that in the cert. They are going to run before assignment rules, auto response rules, workflow rules, and escalation rules. So when you're building out your scenario, then you need to understand when is a validation rule going to run, because it may have an impact on your other features that run in your order of execution. So if one validation rule fails, all other validation rules will continue. So it's going to look at every validation rule you've put in. For lead conversion, you've got to make sure that validation and triggers for lead conversion is enabled. You don't run it if you're using the mass transfer tool, and you can't use it on compound fields like mailing address. You'd have to separate those out into the different fields that make up mailing address. So here's our scenario one. We've got a few scenarios. So for the rule name, we're going to put in external ID as 7 digits. So in this one, we're going to ensure that external ID entered is exactly 7 digits. So my formula in there is that the external ID is not blank or is blank. Oh, sorry, this is going to return true. So if the external ID is blank and the external ID is greater than or less than 7, it's going to return true. And if it returns true, that's when my error pops up. So you can see I've got the and in there when we go back to our formula types. And then for my error message, I've put the external ID must be exactly 7 digits, and I've chosen to put it at the top of the page. Second scenario is if a case is already open, I want to prevent the status from being changed back to new. So in here, I'm saying if the status is changed and the prior value of status is not new. So you see there, I've got not is pickval, prior value status. So you're kind of going backwards in your formula. and my status is not new, then show true. So that's going to show true if someone tries to change it back to new from another status. And I've got my error message there of you cannot select status of new once the case has started.
Yes, it also goes back to some of the areas that Vickie covers where not all formula fields or not all types are supported for all options. So we couldn't use then that kind of exclamation point and equals sign because text fields just aren't supporting that, especially if you've got pick lists. Pick lists have to be looked at specially.
Yes. Okay, scenario 3. So this is I want only the account owner can change the rating. So if I don't want anyone else being able to go in, excuse me, and change an account's rating, only the account owner. So the way I do this is I say if the rating is changed and the owner is greater than or less than or greater than is not equal to their user ID. So I'm saying if the logged in user is not the owner, then don't let them change the rating. And then my error message is only the account owner can change the rating. Last scenario, so I want to show an error if their discount is above 40%. So we don't want to allow our sales staff to give more than a 40% discount in this case. So this is a much more basic formula where I've got discount is greater than 0.4, sorry, and it's going to show true in that case. If it's above 40, then the discount cannot be above 40%, which is my error message. And I think that's it for relation rules.
Like Vickie gets an award for a speed round for that one. Awesome. So last but not least, we're going to talk to approval processes today. So what are approval processes? Approval processes work a great deal like workflow rules. In fact, they actually utilize some of the components of workflow rules, such as field updates, email alerts, and there's a third one, but I'm honestly forgetting what it is. Approval processes help to automate the approval of records. They can submit to one or many approvers, and they can be submitted manually or using process automation, such as Process Builder or Flow. So what you can then say is, when a certain criteria is met, you can automatically submit to approval. That would then lock down your records and wait to open it up until someone has approved that you can go further on it. This is a good way of making sure that your users don't skip around approvals in your system or forget to submit one for approval. What are some of our limitations of approval processes? So if an approval is on the detail side of a master detail relationship, I feel like I've got a common theme today, the owner field isn't available. So typically what happens is when you submit an approval process, one of the options is that you want the approval to go to the manager of the person who owns the record. In this instance, you can't do that because detail relationships don't have an owner field. So we're going to have to indicate those another way. If pre-entry criteria isn't met, a generic error will be presented. So for example, if we have an approval process that has very strict entry criteria into it, and the record you're trying to click submit approval on doesn't meet that criteria, it's just going to say, we didn't find any approval processes that matched your criteria. It's not going to tell you which criteria they are. It's just going to tell you it didn't meet it. Flows can delete records that are pending approvals. So if you do have a record that's pending approval, what you want to do is if you don't want to have that deleted before it's approved, if there's a delete flow, make sure you're checking that a record isn't pending. There's nothing in the system that says, hey, you can't delete me, I'm waiting for approval, which is a little bit different to the fact that a record is locked when it's pending approval. If you're using packages, so whether these be managed packages, unmanaged packages, second generation packages, or your kind of change sets, they can include approvals, but only if the steps in there don't reference users or queues in your Salesforce. So for example, if I just said that I wanted my workflow rule to be approved by the owner's manager, that will deploy. However, if I've said that I want a particular step in a workflow rule to be approved by Vickie, that's not going to be available for me to deploy. And then last but not least, workflow updates that are executed as part of an approval process action don't actually trigger any of your workflow rules or assignment rules. So if I had an approval step that says, okay, once my record is approved, I want to update the field to approved, I then can't use a workflow rule or a process automation to say when the field equals approved, then do something else, because we're not triggering any of those process automations. So what do our approval processes look like? And there's actually two ways of creating an approval process in Salesforce. There's your standard approval process creation, but then there's also this approval process jumpstart wizard. So the jumpstart wizard is a really cut down version. It lets you quickly create an approval process. So here you would pick the object, which I actually forgot the first step. Approval processes are available from the Home tab in your setup menu. You search for approval processes. Once you enter that screen, it'll ask you what object you want to create or see approval processes for, and then we select new. So it's outside of our object manager this time. So once we get to this screen and we've selected to use the Jumpstart Wizard, we enter our name. We can pick some email templates as well. So this is the notification that the user is going to get when it's assigned to them for approval, but then also next, the notification that goes out after it's been approved. And if you want to add the submit button to the page. So again, we mentioned there's two ways to do this. A user can manually hit submit for approval on a record, or we can have it submitted via process builder or flow. So that I was looking for there. Then we've got some entry criteria. So this is what I was mentioning before, is that for some of these, you might want to have entry criteria on it. So we only want a record to be approved when there's a discount applied. If someone tries to submit an approval process and there's no discount on a record, then it doesn't need to go for approval. And then the quick start, jumpstart wizard, last but not least, we then pick who we want to approve it. So we can either let the submitter choose the approver manually, which means after they click submit for approval, they're going to get a lookup box where they can select who's responsible for approving their record. We can automatically assign an approver using a standard or custom hierarchy field. So this is then on the user record, say if you wanted, the manager that we just mentioned before, or alternately automatically assign to approvers. This is where you can opt to assign it to an individual user or a queue. Reminder that these ones here don't allow you to deploy those. You'll need to manually create them. Then we've got our secondary way of doing it, which I believe is a 6-step process. And this is our standard setup wizard. Now, standard setup wizard, step 1 is entering in our naming information. Step 2 is that entry criteria. Step 3 is if we want to choose who the approval is based on approval routing. So this is that same kind of step that we talked to before, determining who goes to approving it, but then also who has the ability to edit a record during an approval. So I've briefly alluded to this before, but if a record is pending approval, Salesforce actually locks the record at the point in time that it was submitted, meaning that no one can edit that. However, with the exception of whoever is outlined here. So you can choose that only administrators can edit records during the approval process, or that administrators or the current assigned approver can edit records during the approval process. So this might mean that it's been submitted for approval, and the approver just needs to adjust 1 or 2 little things before they then go through and approve it, rather than having to reject it, have the user fix it, and then resubmit it. Step 4 is those 2 templates that we talked to before. So when your approver gets notified what it looks like, and then what happens to notify the approvers that the approval process, to notify that an approval process was completed back to the user. Step 5, we then select the fields that we want to display on an approval page layout. So this is maybe based on the email that went out to your users. When they click the link, what do they want to be able to see when they're approving information? So if you've got an approval process that is an approval on discount, you probably want to show the discount field on the approval page so they don't need to go back and forth to the record to work out what they're approving. Oh, I didn't realize scrolling did that. You can then display the approval history information in additional sections, and then you can allow approvers to access the approval page from within Salesforce, so only if they're logged in on the desktop application, or if they want to do it from an externally available mobile device. And then I think this is our last step, is to specify who can actually submit this field for approval. So the default is usually the owner of the record. So sometimes you only want the owner to be able to submit, or sometimes you might have a designated submitter field or some other type of information. So this is where you'll select who can submit it. Again, adding the submit button and allowing submitters to recall approval requests. So what that means is I've gone through and submitted my record. I've looked at it and then I've gone, oh my God, that's actually the wrong discount. I can then recall that and update my record and then resubmit it for approval. If this isn't checked, it means it's going to wait for someone else to deny it or reject it before you can update it and send it back. So just quickly, 3 minutes left. What does this look like if you want to add an approval process into a process builder or a flow after you create it? So this particular one here is one I've plucked off the internet. But you would add a action type of submit for approval. You would pick the object and the name of the approval process that you want to submit and indicate who the submitter is. One thing that you can actually do in this as well is to skip the entry criteria. So I mentioned that if we don't have a discount, we don't want to submit it, but theoretically your flow or process builder should be doing that for you and providing you only want it to enter when a certain amount of criteria is met. And then in our flows, much the same. So you create a new action in flows. You then scroll down the side and pick approval. Submit for approval, you'd enter the record. So as we know, flows can pick up multiple records. So we need to know which record we're going to submit. And then we can select the approval process name or ID. Further down is some of those things like if we want to skip over our entry criteria or provide any additional information such as who the submitter should be. And with 2 whole minutes to spare, that is covering approval processes. I forgot to do some scenario slides in there, but hopefully you've got some good ideas when we were running through that. So things like if you wanted to submit, if a discount is over a certain amount, maybe you want to automatically submit it so that an opportunity discount has to be approved before you can send a quote to your customers. Alternatively, with a case, maybe I'm doing one at the moment, where if you're trying to refund money, you can't actually authorize a refund until such a time as the refund has been authorized by the finance team. So they're just some examples there of what you would use an approval process for. But with that, does anybody have any questions for us today?
Quiet group this morning.
Awesome. So some next steps that we then have for you, these are the same next steps as our last 3 sessions. So if you've been following along and you've already jumped into these, that is fantastic. Otherwise, if you're looking for kind of a little additional help, There is the Platform App Builder Exam Trail on Trailhead, and also the App Customization Specialist Super Badge, which was quite helpful in getting you to do some hands-on and testing your knowledge in that space. Vickie, any last thing from you?
No, nothing more from me. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and hopefully you got something out of it on your journey to Platform App Builder.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining. It's been wonderful to see you. This video will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully once it downloads. I'll remember to do it today. Otherwise, thank you. Keep an eye out. Subscribe to Arc Ladies on Twitter. Follow us on LinkedIn so that you can keep up to date on when part 2 of process automation will be available, which our next session we will be covering flows mostly, so flows and process builders. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, evening, night, wherever it is for you. We hope it's fantastic. And we'll talk to you next time.
See ya.
Bye.